Dr. Amit Waimbe to chair the next session.
I think we'll move ahead. So the next is the advanced care with the injectables. May I request Dr. K.K. Ganopadhyay to come on the dais.
Thank you, Chairperson sir. उपस्थित सगळ्या डेलिगेट्ससाठी माझा सप्रेम नमस्कार. So my topic is this: premix insulin versus basal plus regimes. Now at the onset, I would like to tell you, there's no point saying that this is better than this. This has to be suited to the patient in front of you. Some patients will benefit from basal plus better than premix. Some patients will benefit from premix. What I'm going to show you is the data collating all the evidence that we have so far. So this is my conflict of interest. Now, the number of patients who actually need insulin is there all the time. And as you can see from here, the number of patients who are needing insulin and who actually end up getting insulin is very little. So there is first inertia in starting the insulin, and then once you start the insulin, there is another inertia of adding a second shot of insulin. And this problem is there worldwide. So 60% of patients who have been started on insulin, they don't progress, at least for 2 years. That is the problem, and that is perhaps where I will pitch my talk there. Perhaps there is slight advantage of the premix as opposed to the basal plus. Now, we all know this, the Monier's old data, that the more the blood sugar, higher is the contribution of the fasting glucose. However, we are different. And for us, this looks somewhat like this. So for us, even at the higher HbA1c, we see the contribution of PP sugar remains important, if not more. Now, this is one slide from Novo Nordisk's FIASP data, so which I thought was interesting. And this is all the usual food that we have. I'm from Calcutta. Unfortunately, there's no rice there. However, if you look at all the food, this chapati, idli, pongal, so if you look here is the time when the blood sugar reaches the peak. And you can see here, the peak is reached maximally between 60 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, more often 60 minutes. This is in sharp contrast to the data that we have for the Western literature, where the blood sugar rise will be later. So for us, the PP seems to be more important than the fasting sugar. Now, if you look at this slide, where I put the Indian population on this side and the Caucasian population on this side, and if I put the HbA1c in the middle, this will itself show you why for us the PP is more important. Now, if I put the HbA1c around 8 to 8.5, look at the fasting and PP for the Caucasian population, look at the fasting and PP for the Indian population. Now, I increase the HbA1c, look at the fasting and PP for the Caucasian population, look at the fasting and PP for the Indian population. It clearly bears out that the postprandial surge is much more for us. So we really need to address the postprandial blood sugar if we want to have a meaningful reduction in the HbA1c. Now, sometimes what happens is we see the sugar report and we jump to the conclusion, ye patient ko to ye insulin hi chahiye. And I have made the mistake several times. With mistake after mistake, then I have learned that the most important thing is, teachers log bolte aaye hain, suna nahi, lekin abhi mistake karne ke baad ye samajh mein aati hai ki most important thing is talking to the patient about their meal habits. That is crucial in deciding what you need. And this case will highlight it. So this is a patient who had fasting sugar of 220, PP of 250. Now, clearly, she's on maximal oral hypoglycemic agents. Clearly, इसमें तो basal ही काम करना चाहिए. So I started on basal insulin. So what happened was the fasting began to come down, so it was good, but she started having hypoglycemia during the daytime. So the mistake I made, I did not take proper dietary history, and that is crucial. So I did an 24-hour SMBG on her, 72-hour SMBG on her, sorry, CGMS on her, and this is the profile that she had. So if you look here, throughout the day, the blood sugar, although slightly raised, but it's roughly stable. Something happens in the evening after 9 p.m., and then the surge goes up. So when I asked the patient, what is your dietary habit, what she said, morning mein, everybody is in a hurry, my husband goes to work, my children goes to school, so I don't really have that much food. In the lunchtime, I'm alone at home, so I don't feel like eating much, so I don't eat that much. But at dinner time, everybody comes back, we have a big, hearty meal. So that was the reason why the postprandial surge was there. If I show you the slide before, was here. And what was I addressing? I just looked at the fasting and PP sugar. Fasting to zyada hai, isko to basal insulin mein kaam hona hai. Wrong. I should have added a basal and a bolus here. So this we can do away with one injection instead of a basal plus here. So is there any evidence of starting premix insulin once a day? So that is one injection opposed to 2 injections. Now this is the Garbar 1, 2, 3 study which really highlights this issue. So here patients were started on once a day premix, did not work, twice a day premix, did not work, thrice a day premix. So you can see here, if you look at HbA1c less than 7%, almost 50% of the patients could reach their target of HbA1c less than 7% with once a day premix. So here, for this lady, I could have started off with a premix at bedtime. Now, when you start once a day premix, most of the trials, they have kept the other agents going, including the sulfonylurea. So if you give it at night, you continue the sulfonylurea during the daytime. And that is what I did for this lady, and it worked. So we have got evidence that even if you start with once a day premix, 50% of the time, you'll be successful in getting their blood sugars down. So of course, if you increase it to twice a day, that percentage goes higher. Now, the other thing is adjusting your insulin doses based on the type of food when the patient is taking. Now, this is a typical weekday scenario in West Bengal. So the breakfast is usually a big bowl of rice. Now, lunchtime, it's very, just a fruit, cucumber, it's not that heavy. Dinner time, again, they have roti. This is the usual. But this thing changes on a Sunday. On a Sunday, what happens? The breakfast is very light, the lunch becomes heavier. So if I were to prescribe a premix insulin for this gentleman, and I say you take it with your breakfast to begin with once a day, it is fine for him during the weekdays, but in the weekend, he'll end up in trouble because he'll get hypoglycemia before his lunch meal. So ideally, what should happen is during the weekday, you have got a higher postprandial surge with breakfast, so give it with breakfast. During the weekend, Sunday, holidays, you give it with lunch. So my prescription, therefore, when I'm starting once a day premix, and I clearly write it in the notes, give it with breakfast, bracket, working days, give it with lunch, bracket, weekends and holidays. And this teaches the patient as well, कि हाँ मुझे carbohydrate इधर जा रहा हो रहा है, तो I should be taking it there. So this you can interplay and adjust. The same applies for basal plus as well. If you're giving the basal, you can give it any time of the day, but if you're giving the bolus, you can adjust it based on their meal time. Now, if you look at the evidence, the premix versus basal plus at initiation, this is one of the trials by Keith Bowering, where it showed if you start with premix insulin twice a day or a basal insulin plus a bolus insulin, the HbA1c drop is almost the same. This occurs with a slightly lesser hypoglycemia. But mind you, some trials show that basal plus has got less hypoglycemia. Some trials show that the premix has got less hypoglycemia. So it's not that always premix wins and always the hypoglycemia is there. That is incorrect. So these are the two trials, main trials with insulin initiation, Galapagos and Riddle trial. And you can see here, the HbA1c drop seems to be slightly better for the premix arm. But these are all Western studies. We really have a dearth of Indian studies to highlight this. And I think if we have Indian patients and Indian studies, we will see a better, more robust picture. So here, if you see the hyperglycemia here, hyperglycemia is slightly more in the premix arm, whereas it isn't in the other one. And if you look at intensification, patient is on basal insulin. Now you start premix twice a day or basal plus one insulin. This is the Tina Hone study. Again, the HbA1c drop is similar but slightly better with the premix with similar hyperglycemia. Now again, all of these trials together, you can see here the HbA1c drop with the premix seems to be slightly better as opposed to the basal plus, but the hyperglycemia is variable. Some studies show it's slightly more with the premix. Some studies show there is no difference. Now if I put a systematic review and meta-analysis of all the RCTs together, and these are all the trials. There are 13 trials which have compared premix versus basal plus or basal bolus. So it's either once a day premix or twice a day premix or thrice a day premix compared with basal plus 1 or basal plus 3, that is a full basal bolus. Now these are 13 trials, of which majority is with Lispromix, a few with Sanofi's, and a few with Novo Nordisk. Now, if you look at the HbA1c drop, now if you look carefully, this is variable at the top. Variable means you have got premix once a day versus basal plus, or premix twice a day versus basal 1 or basal plus 2. There, the HbA1c drop is in the middle, doesn't cross the midline. If you have basal plus 3 boluses versus premix 3, the HbA1c drop is in the center. This study, premix versus basal plus, it seemed to favor premix, whereas basal bolus versus premix twice a day, it seemed to favor, not surprisingly, basal bolus, that is basal plus 3 bolus as opposed to 2 premix. So overall, if you consider, it just about touches the midline, so there is no difference, albeit it somehow favors a little bit the basal bolus. If you look at the hypoglycemia, it is bang in the center. I've told you some studies will favor premix, some will favor basal plus. If you consider all of them together, it's right in the center. So you've got HbA1c drop, which is similar, maybe slightly better with premix, supposed to basal plus, hypoglycemia in the center. And in the weight gain, which I don't think is a major issue really for most of our Indian patients, that is again in the midline. So based on this, for this reason, in India, about 3/4 of our patients who are on insulin are on premix insulin. So if I summarize my talk, see the basal plus, of course, if the fasting is way high as compared to the PP, after taking into account the meal habits, it would seem that the basal insulin will do good, and if it doesn't satisfy it, then we add in a plus insulin. With the premix, PP sugars are high, then it would be a better choice. The basal plus has the option of the variable meal times. So if the meal times vary a lot, then perhaps the basal plus might be a better option, because you can give it just when the patient is having the meals. If they have 1 o'clock, and at next day they have it at 4 o'clock, you've already given the basal insulin, you can give the bolus insulin at 1 o'clock or at 4 o'clock. The premix, it assumes that the meal times is similar and the meal portions are similar. If you're giving it particularly twice a day, not for the once a day, but it's more important for twice a day premix. So in the basal insulin, we may continue the sulfonylurea. If you're using basal plus 1 bolus, ideally you should stop the sulfonylurea. Premix, if you're giving once a day, you may continue the sulfonylurea, as have been on the trials. But if you're twice a day, you may decide not to give the sulfonylurea along with it. The basal plus, I have faced this. Slightly more complexity, the patients mistake the pen and they give one for the other. Just yesterday it has happened. So it does happen from time to time. With the premix, that's the biggest advantage, I think, because it's a single pen that you're using twice a day or 3 times a day. So in the basal plus, the other issue is titration of two components. So you're titrating the fasting based on the basal and the PP based on the bolus. That can be a bit of a challenge for many patients. With the premix, you are using the same, whether it's once a day or twice a day. So that is all, and I hope I've finished on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ganopadhyay. That was a wonderful discussion and has cleared up a number of problems.